Well, Chris, congratulations on being inducted into the Club Hall of Fame. We just heard from a number of gentlemen who were involved in the before and the during of the Chris Judd journey here at West Coast. Can I just ask you about the impact straight away? That one waffle game straight into the AFL system. Did you think as a teenager you could have that impact as soon as you were given your opportunity?
Oh, look, thanks, Tim. It was a mixture of emotions, I guess, leading into your first game of senior footy and potentially AFL footy down the track. I think when you're in an AFL club, you do get to contest against some really elite AFL talent at training, and you can build up some level of confidence through that. But until you're actually on the field, you never really know how it's going to pan out. So that was my first game against men. Being from Victoria and being part of the under-18 system, we didn't really get to play against men before being drafted, like the Adelaide kids sometimes do, or WA kids. So, yeah, look, that gave me a bit of confidence, and was lucky enough in the end to get an AFL game the next week, and the rest was history.
And can I ask you then, you come from Melbourne, as you mentioned, you get drafted for Victoria. We know it is a great football state, but the absolute manic nature of a two-team town in WA. All of a sudden, the name Chris Judd, when you walk down the street, everyone wants a piece of Chris Judd. How did you deal with that, especially as you got more into the AFL system and more notoriety? What was life like in Perth as Chris Judd?
Oh, look, I was able to stay pretty focused. I think I was an 18-year-old draftee as opposed to some of the kids that get drafted at 17. So I'd played junior footy with a lot of kids that got drafted who were similar to my age but had been drafted a year earlier. So the main thing for me, I was just hanging out to try and get on an AFL list. And then once I was on that list was, I was a really uptight sort of personality as a kid regarding my footy, and was just really able to zero in on the focus being football and generally push aside other distractions. It was well documented at the time, but I didn't consume any football media when I was over there in the Wild West, just to try and maintain that focus. So I was able to simplify things to an extent. I loved playing and hanging out with the guys at the footy club and enjoying their company, and then was really focused on doing a bucket load of training and extra training on top of that, and really focusing on first getting a senior game and then contributing as much I could to the footy club.
As you know, having then gone back to Victoria, but the fact is that do you cope with that pressure? Is it a different world when you're in a state which is dominated by just two teams, and in particular West Coast, as we know, who have been around longer, more successful? Can you tell us about the pressures of that and how hard it is, in particular when you come from interstate?
Oh, there's a difference. I think the teams with the most scrutiny on them in the AFL are really West Coast, Adelaide, and I reckon Geelong are probably the third, both in really strong footballing towns where the appetite for football and footballing news is immense. I think for me it was when things were good and the team was winning, the whole state rides it with you, and it's just magical to be a part of it. And you can feel that whether you're walking down the street or whether you're out on, back then, Subiaco Oval, you could just feel that energy of not just the fans at the ground, but it really did feel like the whole state. And I know it wasn't the whole state. I know there were plenty of Freo fans, but it felt like the whole state was riding that with you. And when you're on the hero's journey, if you like, which West Coast was on in those early years, on their way to a premiership, it was just it was remarkably special to be a part of. It also means that it's challenging to get an escape from footy, and being from Victoria, not from WA, I didn't have as many of those outlets in networks and friendship groups and family members outside of football. So look, in the end, that was useful for me to build a more balanced life. But while the times were good and the wins were coming, it was just a magical place to play footy.
Pretty whirlwind 5 years for you. You made an impact, of course, and we talk of you meet Beck, you win a Brownlow, you play in a grand final, you play in a premiership. It all happened pretty damn quick. Can I just ask you, do you understand the significance of Chris Judd and the history of the West Coast Eagles in such a relatively short space of time?
Well, I'm not sure. I certainly understand it from my perspective and how important West Coast Football Club was to me. And not for a second am I unaware of how lucky I was to be drafted into a club that is such an elite sporting club. I came in there at a time albeit West Coast had a couple of lean years, but I came in as a young player, being able to model training behaviours of players like Ben Cousins and Drew Banfield and, Glenn Jakovic was still there, Peter Matera, some of the greatest players to ever play our game. In a huge organisation that was able to spend a bucket load on their football resources, and so it went on. So I was incredibly lucky to be able to have those formative years at a club where I could look and copy so many useful behaviours and learn from some of the best players, but also coaches in the game. To have someone like John Worsfold and, just sort of the honesty and integrity he brought to his coaching. Rob Wiley, who was a bit like a surrogate father to me when I moved away from home. I just used to remember driving him mad to do extra kicking and skills training with him hour after hour on his day off and my day off, and never once was he inconvenienced by it. So everywhere I looked, there was just, the only limitation was your own appetite to learn, and thankfully I had a big appetite and plenty of people there willing to assist.
In a moment, we're going to get you. I'm sure you want to thank a few people for this honour being inducted into the Club Hall of Fame. But I just want to touch just briefly on that midfield group that you're a part of through those great years, that premiership year, the back-to-back grand finals, of course, against Sydney. Talk about the powerful midfield. What was that like going out on there, looking over your shoulder, knowing full well that you had that midfield around you?
Oh, look, I used the word magical before, and that's really what it felt like, to be able to rove to Dean Cox, who was just a brilliant ruckman and brilliant player, and then to have players like Daniel Kerr and Ben Cousins, Andrew Embley on a wing, Tyson Stengline in the middle, actually doing some tackling and defensive running for the rest of us. It was an interesting one because the team was littered with stars, and particularly through that midfield group, they get mentioned a lot. But there was also a whole host of elite players who probably didn't get the same notoriety, who were just so important for that group as well. From Drew Banfield to Brawny to Rowan Jones to Tyson Stengline, guys that did those jobs week in and week out, that were incredibly consistent, probably didn't get the accolades. But when you had the whole group, the mixture of elite talent and other high-performing players who played more roles, it was just a group that really complemented each other really well, and like I said, was very fortunate to be a part of it.
Chris, you're always going to be a massive favourite from the football club and also of its fans, and congratulations on being inducted into our Hall of Fame. I'm sure you want to thank a few people for the journey.
Yeah, thanks, Goss. Like I touched on, we'd just love to thank the West Coast Eagles Footy Club for taking a chance on a young bloke with a couple of bung shoulders way back in 2001. Was able to learn a heap of formative lessons in my time at the footy club off some of the best players that have played the game and some of the best coaches and administrators as well. So to everyone there who I was able to learn from and enjoy hanging out with, thank you. To the West Coast fans that gave me so much in my 6 years at the football club. Thank you for all of your support, and to the state of WA for my time over there, but also contributing Rebecca Judd to the Judd family dynasty over here. She's been a very useful addition, and we're very happy with how things have panned out. So thanks to everyone involved, and sad I couldn't be there tonight. Would have been great to be there and share a laugh and a drink with plenty of old friends, but I hope it's a great night and looking forward to getting over to the Wild West soon enough.